The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to Paranormal Concept right here on Parasearch UK Radio with your host, Paul Brook.
Good evening and welcome to the Paranormal Concept Show. I know that you usually look forward to listening to the dulcet tones of Mr. Paul Rook. Unfortunately, Paul can't join us tonight. He's a little poorly. So we send good wishes and blessings to our Paul and hope you get better soon because, you know, you're running out of time for the Christmas break. I think you decided to go on break early is all I can say. Anyway, tonight I have dragged a really, really good friend of mine onto the show to discuss some of his ideas and theories in the paranormal world, and that's Mr. Ashley Knibb. Good evening, Ashley. How are you?
Evening, Kerry. I'm fine, thank you, and thank you for dragging me on to the show.
You know you love it.
Oh yeah, lovely.
He's like, what am I doing? I know you're all really looking forward to the show with Donna Fox Butler, and I promise you that show is going to come up soon, but we just need to get everybody well and ready for that particular show, so it is going to happen. But tonight we're going to be talking psi theory with Ashley. So Ashley, please start by explaining what psi theory is.
Psi theory is a section of my website, my blog website, that I sort of dedicate to dumping what comes out of my brain sometimes onto a blog post and seeing what people think about it. And it mainly is looking at elements of the paranormal and then kind of like spinning them on their head a little bit and then thinking about them a little bit differently and applying different angles from science and belief and all that kind of stuff just to get a different angle on things rather than looking at it in the normal way.
You're really, really good at this, and we have some very late-night discussions regarding various theories that are out there, don't we?
Yeah. Yes, we do, yeah.
And you usually leave me going, what? And you go, off you go and have a little think about that one and then come back to me. The latest thing we've been discussing is actually artificial intelligence, isn't it?
Yes, I've done a post on that recently on the website. Because I saw... there was some stuff on TV recently. I think it was Channel 4. Other channels are available. And basically it was all about the rise of what they call the rise of the robots. And I was watching that quite intently because I like gadgets and tech and stuff like that and science. And basically I was looking at it thinking the artificial intelligence they were showing on there was some really interesting stuff about how far we've actually advanced. And a lot of the stuff, artificial intelligence or machine learning and stuff like that, a lot of it you wouldn't even learn, you wouldn't even know that is actually, you're probably carrying it around in your pocket because a lot of it's on mobile phones as well. And off the back of this, I thought, hey, we should be using some of this stuff in paranormal for research, for investigating, for gathering data, for understanding consciousness, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, my brain kind of exploded into a bunch of posts.
Which I read, and I was like, what are you going on about? So quite frankly, I just don't understand the concept of taking that and how that would be relevant in the paranormal field.
Right.
So over to you.
Okay, so there's different aspects basically, because if you look at machine learning and artificial intelligence, and I'm going to put a little caveat here, I'm no expert in this field and all that kind of stuff because I'm not, but from what I understand and what I've read and watched on TV and all that kind of stuff, researched, we can take artificial intelligence and you can utilize that to gather data. We can create data logging devices, if you like, that don't just gather bits and pieces of data, but they can all equally learn. They could understand where an anomaly is happening because certain things are changing, and then maneuver themselves to do that. So if you think about the robot world, you could put a robot in the middle of a room, and then if an anomaly starts to occur, they pick up certain things coming from the left-hand side of the room. They might move in that direction and then pick up more data and get more specific data, or even move around a building. I mean, there's swarm technology for swarm robots, so you could use them in a big group, picking up lots of data from different places at once. The machine learning aspect of it, it could learn from the data that we gather from these investigations and then try to understand what's going on and help us understand better. And the big pinnacle bit for me, the top end of it, and this is a very quick way of describing it, is obviously the understanding of consciousness, because we could literally, from the ground up, start to build a robot that has artificial intelligence. We can plumb into it certain pieces of knowledge and data and keep adding little bits to head towards what we are, so like a consciousness, and at a certain point we'll be able to see where consciousness kicks in, and then whether within that as well, the belief of the paranormal or the understanding of experiences within the paranormal activities, like that, whether a machine could have the same kind of experiences that we have in a haunted location. Silence.
See, very deep, and a huge topic as well in regards to artificial intelligence. It reminds me of a film called I, Robot.
Yep.
Where, it ended up having a consciousness, didn't it?
Yes, because it's pre-programmed by it's the main robot in that was designed by its designer to do something a little bit different in order to change the concept, so to speak. But also, I can't give so much more about the film, but obviously the main protagonist, is that the right word? Mm-hmm. Was also another artificial intelligence element as well, to be fair. So there's a lot in it. I mean, there's loads of other films as well that cover all that kind of stuff that go all the way back to like the 50s and that kind of stuff. So it's been around for a while.
The concept has, but now it's sort of almost becoming a reality, isn't it? We're seeing it more and more popping up on our social feeds in more of a social manner, I think we'll say.
Definitely. This is the bit that people always miss, is the fact that social media systems utilise machine learning in order to understand, and it's mainly for advertising at the moment, but they utilise it to understand what you like, what you don't like, and then that way they can fire specific ads towards you so that you see certain things that you might want to buy, rather than giving it. So then it's like pinpointed advertising that way, and that in itself is so clever, because obviously it's picking up on the data and stuff that you look at, and then passing it back to you so you get the right stuff. And if you think about from when the internet started, that's amazing.
Oh, it's absolutely it's phenomenal. Because, like you say, when we run an investigation, not so much a ghost hunt, but an actual investigation, the data side of it is the most incredibly important part of it, because you're building up that picture of the location, not just looking for evidence, I suppose you would class it as.
May call it. The classic understanding of evidence. That most people understand, like the video, audio sort of stuff. Yeah, what I look for in an investigation is lots and lots and lots of data, and trying to understand that and gathering all that together, which includes audio and video and all that kind of stuff as well. But it's also collaborating all that together now, and that's the world we live in. We live in a world that's full of data. We're at an age now where we have access to an enormous amount of data as well about ourselves, about our social environments and everything. And that's where all this machine learning and all that kind of stuff comes from, because you can literally mine the data off the back of that. And there's things in science and IT called big data, which is basically access to multiple streams of data in multiple different places in order to understand more and more information. And I think that's where we're missing a treat within paranormal investigation. So I know I always bang on about data, but now we're beginning to get to a point where we really do need to start getting that data in, and there is already loads of it as well around the place. I mean, the likes of the SPR have got tons and tons of data and journals and books and stuff like that you can go through, but we need to do it within our investigation so it's there as well in order to put this together and start understanding these anomalies and stuff.
No, I totally agree with you, because you can build up an environmental picture as well as a paranormal picture, and build up an actual case file that's actually a lot more consistent and a lot more integral to understanding or trying to understand the field that we're all in. It takes it to the next level, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, I think so. It's important to it.
It's an incredibly important part of it, which a lot of people seem to miss out. I mean, it's great fun going out on a ghost hunt. we both do that, don't we, Ashley? It's not that we don't do that. And that's the fun part of it.
I'm not. Yeah, I mean, I know when I go on about data and all that kind of stuff. I'm not knocking the ghost hunt and all that kind of stuff, because I like anyone else enjoy going out sometimes and not gathering data and just going for the experience and spending time in a haunted location and seeing what happens and stuff like that. I don't rock up to every location that I investigate and sit there with a laptop noting down 7 million numbers and making sure that all that's covered and all that kind of stuff, because you can miss things in an experience kind of thing, and that's the bit that keeps us ticking on to get to answer those questions, to get to that goal. So, but if I think, like you said earlier, if you're doing like an in-depth investigation of a location over time and stuff like that, then it's important to start gathering that data, because that's what's going to help back up your case and show that you've put that effort into it to create that raw important information that can be passed on to somebody else to look at.
I totally agree with you. Now, we have people in the chat room, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are listening and you want to join in the chat, there's a little speech bubble down at the bottom of your screen. Just click on the speech bubble, or if you're on a laptop, it's on the toolbar thing. Just click on the speech bar. You'll be able to access the chat room and join us all. First of all, Jason Forst, good evening, Jason, says the perfect explanation of consistent data. Too many fail to realise the importance of consistent and connecting data to prove theory and findings. And I think that's so true, because you have to build up that data. You find, we found recently on an investigation an anomaly in regards to a specific window, didn't we?
Yes, we did, yeah. And we had a data log there, I think, and that's what picked up that anomaly. Yeah. But then we couldn't find it elsewhere, could we? So it's like, well, what is that? So we have the data identified the anomaly opposed to other things, and that's where it's important, I think. Yeah.
Well, incredibly important, and that led me down a completely different road, which wasn't paranormal at all. I was looking into window manufacturer and glass manufacturer. That was so exciting that evening. But that's where it leads you to try and understand why you had that anomaly, whether or not that was something completely ununderstandable. Is that a word? Ununderstandable? Non-understandable. I don't know. I'm making words up now. Yeah, whatever. Or whether or not we could actually find a logical explanation as to why we got that anomaly. So that's why these things are really, really important, specifically when you're building up this case file. Now, our lovely Kaz Rooney is also in the chat room. Good evening, Kaz. She said, is there too much tech and data that is generated by tech which can break down or be corrupted? That's a good point.
So, right, say that again. Is there too much tech that can...
And data that is generated by tech. So, like, it's not infallible. It's not infallible. We have, we talk to Carl Hutchinson's on a regular basis, and he knows all the foil boils. I love making up words on a night when I'm doing radio. All the, the intricacies and things that can go wrong within a piece of tech.
Absolutely. I mean, you can gather as much data as you like for a particular piece of tech, and that might, but if you don't understand that piece of tech, or you don't understand what that's doing, then you're just writing down numbers on a screen that you have no understanding about or why they're there. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that doesn't help at all. So yeah, I don't think there's too much tech. I think understanding the tech and what information it's giving you is important, because otherwise, without understanding the information, there's no point. You wouldn't, in science, for example, you wouldn't do an experiment without understanding the gadgets and systems that you're using and how they themselves may influence your sort of experiment within itself. I mean, and that sort of like knocks on to certain things that we've had conversations about around the observer effect. But I mean, the importance of understanding the tech that you use is massively important to me, because it starts small with things that you can get data down from. But if you start using huge pieces of tech that you have no understanding for, you don't know what you're talking about, sort of thing. It's pointless having them, because it's like we did with the data logger. We picked up an anomaly at the window, mm-hmm. but we haven't gone around and gone, oh my god, that must be a ghost or a spirit. We're looking at, like you just said, you're looking at window manufacturers and stuff like that to try and understand what could cause this anomaly in the real world. Yeah. And what have we missed that we've now picked up? Because obviously your gadget's picked up something. It may not be an anomaly. It might just be something that you don't in a day-to-day sort of environment notice. but because you've got a piece of tech monitoring something, it's giving you that information. So it's like it's being able to distinguish between what is an anomaly and what is just normal occurrence as well is important.
I totally agree. The only trouble is the more complicated the piece of technology you've got. So going back to where we started with artificial intelligence, the more complicated that piece of tech is, the more likely it is to throw up an anomaly, which isn't necessarily what we're trying to gather. We're trying to gather something that is an anomaly rather than just something the tech is not able to understand itself. So it throws it as an anomaly, but it's not. It's just that the tech isn't getting that. Does that make sense? I'm probably not explaining that very well, but
to be fair, I can probably chuck into that piece of information around the artificial intelligence part as well. Because one of the shows that I saw around machine learning, artificial intelligence, they had a robot that they put in an environment, basically in a room with cameras, and they set it up like a camera shop, so a place where you sell cameras. Mm-hmm. Because the idea of what they were teaching the robot to do was, I'll rephrase that because they weren't teaching the robot to do it. What they wanted the robot to do was to be like a salesperson to help sell the cameras.
Right.
So to engage with a customer, find out what they want, and then direct them towards the camera they're looking for, and then sell them that camera. All right. However, what they wanted to do is approach it by not through a method of saying, right, like subroutines, so you like do this. So they put this machine, this robot in this environment. It then learned from the environment where the cameras are. It then interacted and it watched what a normal sales clerk would do. It then watched what would happen when it interacts with certain people, and it learned from its mistakes and stuff like that. So this is where it gets a bit scary as well, because it's like, hang on a minute. So this robot, it's now learning basically from what was going on. So it made mistakes, but it would interact with people in order to gain an understanding of what they were looking for. And then it would help them to find the camera that they were looking for through a series of questions that it had learned from watching and all that kind of stuff. And none of this was programmed into, the only thing that was programmed into this robot was basically how to learn using the data that was given to it. And then as this new data was given to it, it utilised that to, as we do, learn from its sort of experiences and stuff like that, and then move on from there. And I think that's where things within the paranormal field be good. So if we can isolate things that can learn and help us understand things better without and rule out things that we don't understand, such as anomalies within the programming or anomalies within the systems themselves, because we don't understand them, then it can help us get to the point where is this an actual anomaly that we're now seeing? Is this a change in temperature and electromagnetic field or magnetic field or all different things at once, and that happens on every so many seconds, and what's that related to and what's causing that and all that kind of stuff? And it might be able to help us to understand the bits that we don't see within that situation. Yes, too much not understanding the tech means that if you don't understand what's going on in the background, then you kind of open yourself to being subject to thinking that there's an anomaly when there's not an anomaly, and it's just something that's going wrong within the programming of the computer or something. But that's where you have to understand things, I think.
I was going to say the understanding is actually the more important point. And bearing in mind, most people in the paranormal field don't even really understand some of the technology that they're using and what that is actually recording at this point. So do you think that taking something as advanced as artificial intelligence into the field at this point is beyond most people's capabilities of understanding the data that comes out the other end? You know, I mean, Alan Crabtree, good evening, Alan, said the perfect data actually doesn't exist without the user on the other end. You always need an observer. And that's true. The observer effect, basically, yeah. So without looking into it in the first place, you don't set up the situation where we're looking for it at all. So basically, this is if the tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound conversation that we've had, Kerry? Oh, this leads me to a whole different realm. We've been discussing a guy called Schrodinger's box recently. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sort of.
Yeah. Which is basically a cat in a box with some form of toxic poison.
Yep.
Does the cat die or not? It's what's the word you used? A conundrum. That's not the right word.
it's basically the Stranger's thought experiment, was what it was, is to put the cat in the box with a toxin which is released by I think it's like something clever that depreciates over an unknown time frame, basically. So you don't know how long it depreciates, but then it releases the toxin. So fundamentally, you don't know when this toxin would be released if the cat's in the box. And the idea is basically, whilst the cat's in the box, you don't know whether it's alive or dead unless you open the lid and have a look, which is the observer effect. So we can't tell the status of the cat until we open the box, and the section of that is basically until you observe it, then it's both alive and both dead, which is also the double slit experiment within quantum physics, or physics, I think it is, where you have a wave and a particle all at once. Mm-hmm. So until you look in that box, you don't know whether the cat's alive or dead. Now, I've also written a post on Sci Theory about this that I call Stranger's Ghost, mm-hmm. which is the same sort of thing, which is basically when we go into a room and observe what's going on in the room, is that when we observe that there's ghosts and stuff there, so when we walk out of the room, are there still ghosts there? So it's the same kind of thing, because it's without that observer effect, we don't know, without the most important thing, which is us, do all these things happen? And
Very true.
That's a big-ass question, to be fair.
It certainly is. We have had many discussions on this, as I say, late night discussion. This is giving you all an insight into what me and Ashley talk about late at night, into the wee small hours when insomnia has kicked in generally. And I got stuck on the fact that it was quite cruel to just stick a cat in a box, regardless of anything else. And he was like, no, that's not the point of the experiment. Eventually I got it, but I had to take that concept and actually put it into a concept that I understood better. A historical concept, which was actually to do with something that was quite horrific in history. And then I understood that concept. So my point on this one is, if you don't understand it in the concept that it's being given to you, try and relate it to something that you do kind of understand. And my understanding was, it was similar to, and this sounds quite horrible, but when, in regards to Auschwitz, when they put the Jews in, they didn't know if they were dead or alive until they observed.
Yes,
they looked.
True, yeah.
And it was at that point I suddenly got what Schrodinger's box was actually about. It was the observer effect, and you don't know until you see it.
Yes.
And that took me quite a long time of actually banging his head against a brick wall, trying to explain this concept to me, without killing me, quite frankly. But I eventually got it because I ended up putting it into terms that I could then understand. And some of these concepts, that's all you have to do, is get it to a point where you actually get it in whatever context that is. So, which, going back to the paranormal side of it, you're right. Mm-hmm. Now, we want to do, part of the case study that we're doing, we actually want to film the location, don't we, without anybody being in the location. So we take out the human factor.
Yeah. Basically put a CCTV system in operation and then take out the investigators. not take out the investigators, but remove them from the building, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so we sort of take out the psychology of that, and whether or not you're able to manifest that occurrence for yourself, because the psychology is a huge part of the paranormal, isn't it?
Well, yeah, this is the biggest problem. Is like we always look for a simple answer or one answer, and I think there's a multitude of answers, and obviously one of those aspects is obviously psychology, in the aspect that if you turn up to a location looking for ghosts, then you're likely to find them because you might be in that mindset. Now, that's not always the case, to be fair, but that can be the case for some. That can be the case in some cases, using more different words. So the psychology element creeps in sometimes, where you'll see things that aren't there because you're. I was going to say manifest, wrong word. Because you'll conclude based on your belief and understanding and what you're already there looking for anyway. And that's not hallucinations or anything like that. It's just your conclusions are shrunken down, and are more open-minded because you're focused on trying to have that experience or find that experience, and you want to have that experience, so you go down that path. Some people completely the opposite, to be fair. They'll rock up at a location and that won't even touch the sides on them, But then they can also become super sort of skeptical as well, which means they'll completely debunk anything that happens and be completely the other side of the coin, and then you kind of lose that whole balance sort of thing, and they'll almost argue to the fact where they'll put possible logical explanation on something without it being able to be proven. Mm-hmm. Does that make?
Yeah.
So which is and one of the things I always do is if someone turns around and says, "Oh, that's not that or that," because that's clearly that, which is quite clearly proven by standard science and blah blah blah. I say, "Okay, then prove it." And they're like, "What?" Because usually what people think is if it's normal stuff that can be debunked, like I'm trying to think of something, can't think of an example off the top of my head, but if it's normal standard stuff that could be proven by standard science, then people usually just accept it rather than proving it, which they should do, because actually standard science says it should be repeatable then, which means we should be able to repeat it and then be able to prove that as well. And also, so we should be able to debunk things through proving or repeating the experiment and doing it again. And then if we can't, then it becomes another anomaly and something that we can't understand, and maybe it's not something that fits into standard science. So you've got both ends of the scale, and psychology fits across the bandwidth of those by sort of, I don't know how you put it, giving us a bit of rose-tinted glasses sometimes when we look in the location because we've turned up with that mindset and that psychology. I think I went off on a tangent.
I mean, going back to the window thing, because we had this anomaly, there's an idea that it could be something that's contained within the window manufacture that has caused this anomaly. Yeah. So it could be lead, it could be magnesium within the manufacture. So we could then go on, being a crystal rock kind of queen that I am, I can get hold of those kind of minerals quite easily. And actually, we could see if out of the location we can recreate that anomaly and prove that it's not something paranormal. Yes. So there's a logical explanation that we can then repeat somewhere else, and then that gives us a possibility of what it could be, because the anomaly is only a change in data, which means that if we can create that change of data again, and in that respect, then that means, like you said, that anomaly is then explained logically by something. Exactly, rather than jump into the automatic assumption that because we had... It's a ghost. It's a ghosty. Yeah, it was a ghost on the windowsill that's causing the anomaly. But we could easily have all had that mindset, like you said, where we all went, no, that's definitely a ghost because there's nothing there, that could have caused it, because we looked for the logical while we were there, didn't we? Yeah, we looked for if there's any electrics around there or anything like that could cause it, lights, things like that. Outlets, wireless networks, alarm bells, alarm cabling, all that kind of. We look for all the standard stuff that we always look for. That's usually evident and you can find quite easily. But we couldn't find anything. And then I think as well, what was really weird as well, after a certain point, I think the anomaly just stopped as well, didn't it? Yes, so it did. It's which is why it's an anomaly, not because obviously if it was something standard or fixed within the thing, you'd think it'd be repeating itself over and over and over again, but for some reason it stopped. Now we also know that I suppose like rocks and minerals and stuff like that change depending on pressures and the weather and temperatures and all that kind of stuff. So that it was a cold night, so we did put the heating on every now and then as well. So it was freezing. So that could be a part. That could be a part of that as well. So yeah, it's looking into all those facts before going, it's a ghost. Exactly. But that doesn't. What we're doing by looking at things like that is we're not trying to claim that ghosts and that stuff don't exist and stuff like that. What we're trying to do is find a true data to back up their existence, if that makes sense. Completely. So Jason has asked, how much importance do you put into different aspects like scientific, religious, psychology, physiology, environmental? What importance do you put into these different aspects? Yes. They're all important. I think, over the years, when I've been looking at it, I've gone from one side where I've looked at science and then gone at another side where I've looked at belief kind of approaches and spiritual and all that kind of stuff. And I think it seems to centre around us as an individual, as that observer in the environment. Now, whether we're creating these paranormal events ourselves through some kind of telepathic interaction or telepathic manifestation or something like that, where we're
connected with information and then almost projecting it out into our environment, or whether we're seeing it within our mind's eye because it's just there in the environment. I don't know, but we're always there. So we have to be the common denominator, which means in that case you have to take into consideration. I'm just going to reel off a list now. You have to take into consideration physiology. You have to take into consideration psychology, environmental, because what's going on around you, and then of the individual as well. Obviously, I mean, psychology kind of covers things, but obviously an individual's beliefs and what they look at and all that kind of stuff, their knowledge, their education, their understanding of the world, how they were brought up. There's a big whole package when you look at it, which we don't always look at. Which is then this is what I call like zooming out. So you're zooming out and looking at the bigger picture. And by doing that,
you tell me to do this all the time, don't you?
Yeah. So if you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, there's a whole lot more things that we never see. And some of the things are also like the macrocosm, microcosm, all that kind of stuff that centers around who we are and what we are and all that kind of stuff. And those elements are often they're disassociated with an experience, although they're very, very much associated with the experience itself. So one person's experience might be completely different to another person's because of the way they were brought up, or the belief system that they have, or their understanding and all that kind of stuff. One person may see spirit, where another person will feel spirit and all that, or hear spirit and all that kind of stuff. And this is because of how they interpret the information that's around us.
I totally agree. We have Kev Kerr in the chat room with us. He said you can see, feel and remember a situation as paranormal if you want it to, which is very, very true. I mean, I didn't realise the impact of the light factor on your eyes, your retinas and stuff like that. When you see, like some people say they see like shadow when they're in the dark, they see like darker shadows, but that could just be how your your eyes are reacting to the changing light that's going on. All sorts of things, like it can come as green lights, not green lights, green mists, red mists. All sorts of mists can be created from your eye, but actually is not anything other than a physiological reaction to your environment.
Yeah, and stuff in your environment can also create resonating vibration within your eyeballs as well, that can create different visual effects as well, which is pretty cool. So there's so much there's so much going. It's hard. That's a funny one. I saw a ghost, and I actually didn't see a ghost because your eyeball was vibrating at weird speed. But there's so much to take into consideration. This is the whole zooming out thing. And if you zoom out and look at all the other aspects, I mean, a lot of the time it can be quite dismantling, because there's so much more going on that it can be like, well, actually we can't. This is where you also often get the attitude, well, we're never going to prove whether the ghosts are real, then are we? And it's like, well, you have to, if you want to, then you have to take into consideration all these things and then start to drill them down. And that's where our data comes back into play. And unfortunately, the thing that's going to be better at learning and understanding how that data is being understood is probably going to be a machine or an artificial intelligence, because it can do it quicker than us. Well, actually, no, we can do it quicker than that, but it can do it quicker and understand what's going on, and then we can look at it and review it and go, oh, that's what happened then, and oh, that's what happened then. Whereas you can't do that, because you can't look inside a brain and do that without causing some damage. So
we'll start having to call you Hannibal Lecter if you start doing that. Now, Eva is in the chat room. Good. I did a show with Eva last night on Paramania about light workers. If you missed that, you can catch that on demand on the Paramania channel. That was a fantastic show. Good evening, Ava. She says objectivity is extremely important and also very difficult to achieve sometimes. And that's a really good point, because sometimes your personal experience overtakes all your logics. Yes.
Yeah, and the classic of this is what's the best example I'll probably give around this is probably if you go back to the Victorian time, and you had a big explosion in spiritualism, and mediumship, and then you had a lot of people being fake mediums in order to take a few pennies off a few people here and there, and they were jumping on board with the fact that people had lost people, and then they're taking advantage of that, so people were turning up hoping to connect with someone and hoping to see something or gain something. And they were giving them what they wanted, and this kind of happens today as well. Sometimes if you've got the same kind of mindset, if you're that engrossed in experience something, you're likely to generate that experience when you turn up at a haunted location and look for something. And that's where that psychology kicks in and takes over. And things can, tiny small cues can give you what you want, if that makes sense.
No, totally agree with that.
And that way you end up with where you might have seen a shadow, which could be perfectly explained by something. That shadow then quickly becomes a tall, thin man with a weird hat, which is actually the picture that was on top of a doorway in the room that you've just passed through. But because you've seen that in your peripheral vision, not really logged it properly. But then when you get into the next room, you then, because of what you're looking for, you've associated the two together, and all of a sudden now you've got a ghost with an identity and that kind of thing. So. And that's kind of things you have to be careful with and difficult. And when we go into investigations like what we've done recently in other buildings, that's some of the things you look for. You look at the reports that people have done before, and then you look at the environment to see what could have spurred that reaction, why people would have seen that kind of thing, and then you can start to break it down a bit more. And that's not saying that people are lying or anything like that. It's just in the spur of the moment or the heat of the moment when they're there looking for that kind of stuff, we don't always, and I've done it myself as well, we don't always jump to the best logical conclusions.
I totally agree with you. No, we are human and we are infallible, believe it or not. Yeah. I know I don't like to think I'm infallible, but it has been proven, unfortunately. Now, we've had this, not me and Ashley, but on an investigation I did a little while ago, this actually was quite pronounced. I didn't realise it at the time, and it was one of the things that actually came out. And we'd done a medium session, and one of the names that came out was, like, oh my God, we've got a name, fantastic. We can research that, we can go away and we can do that. But as we walked down the stairs, there was like a notice board, and it wasn't one of like the main notice boards of the museum. It was just like a tiny... just like loads of different pieces of paper pinned on it. That's the only way I can explain it. And on this notice board was actually, and it wasn't even A4 size, so I'd say A5, and it had the name and a picture of the woman. Now, I am not saying for a minute the psychic medium who was working at the time stopped and looked at that board, but you then go, you can't take that as anything other than she might or he might have just subconsciously picked that up as they walked past that, because you had to walk past it to get to the room that we were in. So it was like, oh God, no, you can't count that really, because it's there, it's open to anybody to read.
That's exactly right. As harsh as it sounds, and it does sound a little bit harsher because I've worked with mediums and stuff before, and I know that they're doing a good job and all that kind of stuff, and they've not researched a place or anything like that. So I know that they're not lying to me or anything like that. And what the thing you have to do is be very, very careful about is there are, as humans, we walk into a location and we often like to think that we only look at certain things and then we can move through an environment, but that's not true at all. We're still animals at the end of the day, and we still have that behavioural element where we have to maintain to make sure we're all right. And as we walk into an environment, we take into all the information we can. We knock it into our unconscious mind and leave it there, and we only put the stuff in the conscious mind that we think is relevant and important. Mm-hmm. So, which means that when in that scenario that you've just described, then, and I'm not saying that this is the case, but this could be the case, is that they walked up the stairs, past that piece of paper. Peripheral vision, they saw that piece of paper, registered that information, and put it in their unconscious mind, sat down, and when they connected, because they went through a state where they relaxed and got into that spiritual kind of position, they then connected with their unconscious mind and then pulled that information in.
Yes.
Because they know it's relevant to that location. Well, they don't know it's relevant to that location, but their mind knows it's relevant to that location, and it gives them it from their unconscious mind. Now, what's fascinating is that a lot of people turn this around and go, oh, they've cheated then. And it's like, but it's not. In my mind, I think it's fascinating. I think it's amazing. If the mind can do that, think how amazing and what brilliant things it can do.
Yeah.
Don't discount it just because of that. But we have to be cautious of this, because obviously we're looking for information to prove. Sorry, I should have got a drink before I started. We're looking for information that can prove life after death, the survival of human consciousness post-mortem. And the only way we're going to do that is to get that holy grail of piece of information that is very, very, very hard to come by. It's been sought for over 100 years, possibly more than that, actually, centuries and centuries individually, but I mean, documented-wise. And it's very hard to get because there's always that information where you go, well, they could have read that in that book, or they could have got that from there, or that doesn't prove that it's that person because these other 4 people knew that piece of information as well. So it's very, very difficult to get that tiny, tiny piece of information that relates only to a person that's passed away that no one else knows.
Do you want to take a quick break so you can run and get a glass of water?
I'm gonna hit the kitchen and get a glass of water. Yeah.
Okay, let's just take a quick break and we'll be back right.
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are, to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?
Oh, welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show. I have taken the helm tonight as our lovely Paul Rook is not feeling very well. And thank you so much for joining us into the chat room, everybody. It's absolutely brilliant reading everything that you're saying. Really, really interesting comments going on in there. Welcome back to Ashley. As always, a fascinating discussion going on. Have you got your drink now, honey?
Yeah, I've got my drink. I'm a little bit better.
Now, before we went to the break, we were talking about how our unconscious, subconscious mind can sometimes pick up on information that we don't even realise it's picking up in a location. So you've worked with plenty of psychics and mediums in the paranormal field. How can you take out, completely remove that cue, that mental cue, whether it be, apart from blindfolding and you know, like plug in their ears, how can we do that so we know that the information they're getting they can't possibly have known before they got there? We can't, can we?
Do you know what? You've got a guest on Sunday, Cal Cooper.
I have. I'm so excited about that. And
he is actually working, or just coming to the end of an experiment, I believe, or a piece of research that he's actually put. He's always put himself. I don't think he's put anybody else in that position, but he's actually utilising a flotation tank, which I think is possibly the closest thing. It's like that we could do to get that scenario, because in that scenario, you're obviously you don't understand what's going on in the environment because you're floating, and obviously you're in the dark as well, so there's no information in there or cues or anything like that. That kind of environment, or the GANs field is obviously one that they've used over the years many times, which is good as well, because obviously you can't see what's going on around you as long as you arrived at the location completely blindfolded, so that you don't know where you are, and you've been driven around in circles about 5 billion times, so that you're completely disorientated as well. Which just sounds like a fun thing to do as well, to be fair. But
yeah. You're weird.
But we've got roundabouts in this country, haven't we? So we can utilise them well. So it's really difficult, especially if you want to put it in a lab type environment. Then obviously, like I said, Cal's he'll probably talk more about the flotation tank experiment or something when he comes on. But that kind of experiment where you put someone in an environment where they can't see anything and they've got no cues, and they're in an environment that doesn't give them any information at all, or the Gansfeld experiment where it gives them the red light and then white noise. So again, they haven't got any cues or information that they can utilise to know what's going on or where that information is coming from. They're good environments to use in order to gain interesting information, because I've done the Gansfield as well on some locations. But if you walk someone into a location or let them know anything about what's going on, any tiny cue becomes a piece of information. The mind is a brilliant thing, and it will piece together what it needs to piece together quickly. And now what I get then off the back of that is, if you get someone who's in an environment, for example, let's say in our haunted house, in the most haunted room in that house, yet our medium doesn't know anything about where they are or anything like that, and they walk into the room, and they start giving information. They're blindfolded, let's say, as well. And they've also say they've got earphones on, so they can't hear anything as well. So they haven't heard anyone talk. So basically, we've blocked them off audio and visually, so they can't see or hear anything. What I think, which is basically the Gansfield experiment, if they start reading off information about the location or information relating to somebody else in the group, then we've got a situation of what I think is called telepathic interaction, in which case they're getting information from other members of the group, or even from a wider distance from that, from people that have been there or related to that place in the past, in the future, or in the present. And that's where that information starts going. And that's when, for me, it begins to get a lot more fascinating, because it may not be proof of life after death, but it's certainly proof of a connectivity between us all, which I think is an amazing thing.
But the human mind is incredible at also taking two pieces of information, like 2 + 2 makes 5, and sometimes it's all about a perception thing.
Yeah, that's a big problem as well, isn't it? It's a clever thing, but it's also its worst enemy, isn't it? It can put information together and come up with really good pieces of factual bits and pieces, but it can be fooled as well quite easily, because we've got magicians and stuff like that Darren Brown is a classic, isn't he? He's an absolute genius at fooling the mind.
Exactly.
And things can happen day to day that fool us as well, where we're like, oh, I thought that was that, but it's not. It's actually something completely different. So our mind can be fooled, and that's something you have to bear in mind, especially when doing paranormal investigation, I think.
Totally, I totally agree with that. So, what is the situation where you're in an investigation? Kaz has brought this up in the chat room. In locations where no tech is working, I find this on a regular basis. I can't get any tech to work, and then all you're left with is your own body and your own instincts and your own abilities. I'm going to say. Can you count that as anything paranormal? You can't. That's just a personal experience, surely.
Personal experiences are important, aren't they? Because they're the anomalous experiences. They're the accounts that we work from. They're the grassroots. This is the talking mongoose again.
oh God, the mongoose, the mongoose. I'm haunted by mongooses.
And a more recent story, but I won't mention that.
Okay, carry on.
This is carry on. This is the concept that if you're an investigator, a paranormal investigator, this is where we start from, because these anomalous experiences is where it all starts, is where it stems from. People in their own homes or at a location or even outside somewhere will have an experience of some kind, and then they'll mention that to someone else, and they'll mention it to someone else, and eventually, in some cases, they get investigators involved, and then they go and look into it and all that kind of stuff. But it all stems from that original experience. In that original experience, the Greg Lawson calls it the alpha case, I think. Mm-hmm. In that point, there's no gadgets available, because they're not ghost hunting, because they're just there. They've not even got a notepad and pen with them, because they're not there trying to take notes. They are just literally there in the environment, and it is their body and everything that takes in the information they register. And it's in the next stage from that, from an investigator point of view, from my point of view anyway, is the interview, and speaking to them and asking them questions and prizing information about that experience out of them, to try and understand what they went through, what happened, how it happened, what was the environment at the time, and all this kind of stuff, and get an understanding for what occurred that led to that experience for them and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes when you do that, you'll go through the interview phase, and then you'll ask certain questions, and you'll find out that the reason they probably had that experience is there's a logical explanation for it, and some people accept that logical explanation because it makes perfect sense, but they hadn't thought about it.
Very true.
Yeah.
Or it's come from an external source, such as like a influence, like alcohol or drugs. But there is a huge, sometimes people take a concept, a theory, and make jumps of assumption. Quite common this is. They'll say, because of this, it means this, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It's just a jump of an assumption. We've both read a book recently. I'm not going to name it because we're both interested in the concept and I think it needs a lot more work on the concept. We think it has a good working theory, but it needs a lot more work to develop said theory. I think we can both say that, yeah? And
I'll agree.
throughout this book, we were both going, but that's a jump of assumption.
Yes, yeah.
And so you have to be careful of that as well, don't you?
From our perspective, it seemed like a jump of assumption. Yeah,
that's true.
Or possibly based on belief. I don't know. I don't know. But I mean, that's very true. And that assumption, that's what I was mentioning earlier. That's why all those factors come into play: belief and education and memories and all that kind of stuff always come into play, because that's what we base that assumption jump on. Because we look at our historical events that happened in our lives, and that's why we make that jump of assumption, because it's like a calculated risk, if you like. Oh, that must be that, because in my previous experience it was to do with that and that and that, or I believe it could be that, so I go with it. And that's kind of how we get to that kind of point. But that also happens in reverse as well, where people will can certain things without giving them proper evaluation, because they'll jump to that assumption straight away. Talking mongoose.
Okay, do you want to explain the talking mongoose to everybody?
There's a famous case that most investigators will know, which is basically a Harry Price case, because you've all just heard Harry Price, which was basically the talking mongoose case, where he went off to investigate a talking mongoose, which sounds completely crazy, but he gave it time, because obviously it was something weird and odd, and he gave it the opportunity to go and investigate it, whether it was real or not. Now, this came back up at Paraforce this year when I challenged Kerry.
Well, it came out of a conversation. We was in the car driving back to Paraforce on the second day.
Defense.
And we got into this discussion. Discussion. And basically...
Yeah, about assumption.
I was like, about assumption, exactly. Excuse me. And I was saying, my God, he must have been crazy. Why would you even bother wasting your time and effort when you've got so many other fantastic cases that I'm sure he was being brought to on a daily basis? Why would you waste your time if you've got a case on your desk that said, we have a talking mongoose that has psychic abilities? Why would you waste your time on this? And Ashley, again, banged his head against the car window a few times and was like, right, challenged me to ask every investigator I could find, basically, to whether or not they would actually have investigated. I was proved wrong on this, because I would have gone, nah, not even worth my time or effort. But it showed about what I learned from that was because everybody would. Would have investigated this apart from me. And it it was about, like you talked about, zooming out, seeing the bigger picture, and not actually just seeing a talking mongoose. It was about seeing a bigger picture on this. And that's the lesson I learned on that one, was just to not judge a book by its cover, I suppose, to actually dig deeper, to zoom out. And that's why Ashley forever is now going to be winding me up about said talking mongoose. But this has come up in the media recently, and we alluded to it a little earlier. And we've talked about it on the Parasearch UK radio show as well, which was the Amethyst Realm having sex with ghosts. Now, it seems ludicrous on the surface. However, Jay Lynch actually brought a really good point to the surface on this one. He said, if she can do that and is actually physically experiencing that, then why can't we record that extensionally? Extensionally? Is that the word?
Yep.
You know, if she can do that, then surely should be able to call forward a ghost, and we would then be able to record environmentally and all those other factors that we've been talking about to see if she is actually being able to have an experience with a ghost, or whether or not she is just mentally manifesting that physical response within herself. Exactly.
Yep.
I think I got there on that one. And that's a really good point. I mean, these ludicrous cases come up, and sometimes it is about opening the door, as it were, to crazy, and actually exploring that facet a little bit more and going, okay, so yes, it's a point of ridicule, but if you zoom out as Ashley says to me on a regular basis, then seeing the bigger picture of that.
That's exactly it. I mean, that's what I did. When I saw that case first come up and I saw it getting slammed from left, right and centre, I was like, classic. And to be fair, in my head, I went straight away, I was like, talking mongoose. And it's exactly that. I mean, firstly, Jay's point is fantastic. She could have issues, she could have psychological issues that she probably needs help with, and it could be a completely crazy situation. She could be attention seeking. That's a possibility. We can't rule that out. Mm-hmm. Secondly, however, if it is as fantastical as she's making out to be, and she can actually do this, and this is a possibility, you've got one thing there that we can't get in any haunted location at all. Well, yeah, mostly any haunted location, which is a ghost on tap. She can literally get these things to come and do what she wants at a certain point in time. And as she's physical and they're not physical, we can then monitor, so to speak, the situation.
It's like a bad
and understand.
Porno.
It does seem a little bit like a bad porno, but in the quest of science.
Well, anything in the quest of science.
But basically, if that's the case, then it proves a connection between something and something else. It doesn't prove a connection between this and the afterlife, or that what she's experiencing are ghosts, spirits, demons, incubus, succubus, whatever you want to call them, #demon, or anything like that. It shows that she's having an interaction with something that's non-physical, and that then gives us something else. I mean, like you said just a minute ago, it could be a psychological element that she's actually manifesting these things themselves. She's creating these experiences herself. And if that's the case as well, again, we'd be able to understand that by understanding the situation. Now, obviously, ethically speaking, given the scenario that she's talking about, it's probably highly unlikely that you're ever going to get to monitor the situation, so to speak, because that would be pretty much... I mean, would you let someone into your bedroom to monitor the situation?
No, but she might let something like an artificial intelligence or tech the crap out of the room.
Good tie back. Excellent, Brent.
Did you like that?
So that would just loop the whole show in one. That's brilliant.
Oh, I'm good at this, aren't I good?
I was like, I must have really planned this show. But yeah, no, exactly. You could to coin a phrase, take the crap out of the room and the location and let her get on with it, so to speak. And then you could gather a load of information and understanding about what was going on, and we could learn a lot. If that's the case, if it's true and all that kind of stuff. But we shouldn't turn around and go, oh yeah, that's a load of rubbish. It could be a load of rubbish. I'm not sitting there saying, I 100% agree with her story, because people do a lot of things to get on TV these days.
Oh, they do. Yes, they do. Yep. 15 minutes of fame and all that.
Yeah, exactly. But without proper investigation or proper analysing the case and stuff like that. I mean, one thing I did say, I think I put a comment on one of these Facebook pages. I said, what would be good if we had someone who understands body language, who could read the body language she was giving off while she was in that interview on This Morning, and then they might be able to understand whether she was telling the truth or not, and that would get us one step further to understanding where she actually is on that. There's a guy actually out there who does do that, doesn't he? Who is that? Sorry, sidetrack.
My thought's gone off into a tangent now, hasn't it?
So that'd be the first step in understanding it. Understand the body language from that first interview on This Morning. Was she telling the truth? And if that was inconclusive, if we could engage with her and understand a bit more and stuff like that. But I certainly wouldn't rule it out, because it is quite literally the modern day talking mongoose.
It certainly seems to be. And on that note, we have actually come to the end of the show. So thank you so much, Ashley. It's been a fascinating discussion, as always. I always have fascinating discussions with you, and you always make my mind think, which is sometimes it creaks a little bit, but it's always good. Now, tomorrow night on Parasearch, we have the Haunted History Show with Penny G. Morgan. She is talking, and I'm going to get the name wrong, the Four Horseshoes? I'm going to get the name wrong. Tune in tomorrow. You'll find out what she's talking about tomorrow. On Thursday evening, we have Kaz Rooney's new show, The Spectral Zone. She is talking to Alan Crabtree, and they're talking all things ufology and Area 51. And on Friday, we are talking the folklore and myths and legends surrounding Christmas, because we are quite rapidly approaching the Christmas season. Oh my God, I'm going to start crying. And on Sunday evening, as I said before, we have the amazing Cal Cooper in the studio, and Mr. Ashley Knibb will be joining me again as well. Thank you to everybody who joined us in the chat room. It's been fascinating watching your comments go by. There are so many in there tonight. I can't quite believe how many people, and the discussion has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Ashley. It's been fantastic.
Thank you having me.
Again.
Pulling me into another show last minute.
I know.
It's been great. It's been great. Thanks, Kerry. Cheers.
I know, you're very, very welcome. I gave him an hour's notice, bless him. And on that note, everybody, we wish you all a very farewell and good evening.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.